the adventure to Imagination Island with special guests Will, Kingston, and Roman. So once upon a time, there was a little boy named Captain Ryan. He had a faithful matey, Brady brother, and they had a little sister named Nora. And do you know what else? They had some friends. And their friends are over at our house right now for this story. And it's Kingston and Will. And they have a little brother named Roman, right?
Yeah.
They were their adventuring buddies. And so, one day, they all got together and they all got on the pirate ship and they decided that they were going to sail to Imagination Island. And Will and Kingston were so excited because they had only been on one adventure so far, right? And where was that? Powder Island, right? So they said, what's going to be on Imagination Island? And Ryan said, I don't know. We've never actually been to this one before. And they said, really? You've never been to Imagination Island? And Ryan said, well, it's really hard to get to Imagination Island. For all of us to get to Imagination Island, we all need to look at this map. And he held up a paper, and do you know what was on the paper? It had nothing on it. Nothing at all. That's right. You had to use your imagination to see the map. And so they all looked at the paper, and do you know what Kingston saw? He saw a little fairy. And do you know what the fairy was doing? What was it doing, Kingston? You don't know? It was waving a wand, and do you know what color that fairy was? Blue? Black? Black? Yeah, it was Morgoth, the fairy from Mystical Fairy Island. No, but that's what Kingston was imagining. A snake? Brady was imagining a snake, and it was slithering. And guess what? The snake became the path to Imagination Island. They had to go around Marshmallow Island, and then they had to go around Trap Island, and then they had to go around
Treasure Island.
They had to go past Treasure Island and Blizzard Island and Chocolate Island. And at the very end, they would get to Imagination Island, and then Ryan had to imagine something else. What was it, Ryan?
I think there's a giant tiger. It was pointing that way, and then that way, and then that way. They had to go all the way that the tiger was pointing.
Whoa, so he imagined that. And so after they went past all of those islands, they came to a giant tiger statue. And do you know what color that statue was? Orange! And black stripes on it. And its eyes were green fire. And when they got past all of the islands, they got to that statue. And Ryan, Brady, Nora, Will, and Kingston all looked up at that giant tiger statue. And Roman. And do you know what that tiger statue did? It stood there because it's a statue. That's what statues do. They just stand there. But not only that, its eyes went boom, and they turned on green fire, and its hand started to come down like this from its head, and it pointed a finger to the north. And Brady said, I think we need to go that way, guys. And so they steered their pirate ship that way. And as they were getting super close to the island, Nora and Roman said, wait a minute. What if Imagination Island is invisible until we imagine it? And they said, well, hurry, you need to imagine something. And Nora and Roman thought, and they said, what if it's like an island full of trees? And do you know what they saw?
Trees.
A bunch of trees just appeared right out of nothing. And Roman said, what if the ground was jello? And then the whole ground under those trees turned to jello, like that, into a huge island. And they walked onto the island and they were going, and all that jello. And Will bent down and he scooped up a big handful of jello. And do you know what he did?
Ate it.
Nope. He threw it way up into the air and he said, clouds. And he threw it like that and it went, and it got gigantic. It turned into a giant jello cloud because that's what he was imagining. And he said, now I'm going to eat my jello. And he laid down like this and he opened his mouth. And do you know what started to happen? That jello cloud started to rain jello down on them. And a giant piece of the jello rain came down and it went right on Will's face. And he went, oh, yummy. And they said, whoa, jello rain, we've never seen that before. And then, do you know what happened? What? Brady said, I know what I'm going to imagine. And he looked over off into the trees and he said, Marshmallow Mountain. And all of a sudden, a huge marshmallow mountain came and appeared, going up right through the trees. And they said, awesome! And Ryan said, oh yeah? Well, I'm going to imagine that I'm as fast as lightning. And he started running towards that marshmallow mountain. And do you know what happened? He turned into a lightning bolt. And as he was going towards that marshmallow, all of a sudden, the marshmallows turned into cookies. And Ryan struck the side of the cookie mountain and he appeared in a big blast hole that he made from when he was lightning. And he went, whoa, that's the fastest I've ever gone in my entire life, even when I'd use my super fast shirt. And he said, but hey, I thought this was supposed to be a marshmallow mountain. And guess what? Roman said, I wanted to make it cookies. And they said, Roman, actually, cookies are pretty delicious. And so they all ran and jumped onto the cookie mountain. And Brady was just about to take a giant bite of the cookie mountain when all of a sudden the cookies disappeared. And they all started falling down, down, down toward the ground. And then the trees disappeared. And then the jello disappeared. And it was only ocean beneath them. And they all splashed right into the ocean. And they looked around. And not only was all the jello and trees and cookies gone, but they saw that now they were in a giant cage with metal bars, Brady. And guess what? They said, hey, where's all of our fun stuff? And they said, who's doing this? Who imagined this? And they all looked at Nora and she said, that's not me. I was trying to imagine a princess castle. And they said, Roman, is this you? And he said, nope, I wanted my cookie. And Brady said, it's not me. I was trying to imagine a giant castle for me to play in. And so they said, well, if it's not any of us, who is it? And they looked around, and do you know what they saw? They saw a black pirate ship with red and black sails.
And all the kids together said, oh no, Captain Pierre, what are you doing here? And he said, ha ha, Captain Ryan, I finally trapped you. I was following you and your new friends for some time now, and I finally found Imagination Island. I have been looking for this place for so long. I've been planning on using it to build my ultimate fortress. And they said, Pierre, come on, we were just trying to have some fun. And he said, Ah, but I am having fun now, aren't I? And Ryan and all of their friends, they all looked at each other and they said, what are we going to do now? And Roman, he said, I think I have an idea, guys. I think that Captain Pierre is just imagining that we're in this cage. But are we more powerful than him? Do you think that he has an imagination that's more powerful than ours? How is he overriding our imaginations? They said, it must be his entire crew. Maybe he has them all working together to imagine the same thing. And Roman said, guys, why don't we all work together to imagine the same thing? We have much more powerful imaginations than Captain Pierre, don't we? And they all said, yeah, you're right. I think part of the problem is we were all imagining different things. And Imagination Island was trying to do all of them together, but as soon as Pierre and his crew showed up and they were all imagining the same thing, then everything vanished and we fell into their trap. So they said, all right, let's do this. And they all said, okay, what are we going to imagine? And Nora said, let's all imagine that Pierre's pirate ship turns into a giant octopus and gets all of his crew in its tentacles. And they said, oh, that would be so funny. I don't know if it'll work, though, because that's his pirate ship is already a real thing. I thought Imagination Island was just over here where the island is supposed to be, and anything you imagine on it will happen. She said, I guess we could try. Ready? Everybody, imagine that Captain Pierre's pirate ship is a big, giant octopus, and it's going to catch all of the guys in its tentacles. So they said 1, 2, 3. And they all imagined that all of Captain Pierre's pirates and his crew were going to be snatched up in the tentacles of an octopus. And do you know what happened? Nothing. Nothing happened. His pirate ship stayed exactly the same. And Captain Pierre said, what are you guys whispering about over there? Are you going to try to break out of my cage? And they said, it's an imaginary cage. He said, well, I guess my imagination is more powerful than yours, isn't it? And Ryan said, guys, let's do this. There's absolutely no way that Pierre and his crew have better imaginations than we do. Let's imagine something awesome for ourselves, something that will scare them away so that they'll never find this island again. And they all thought, and Roman said, ooh, I have a good one. Why don't we imagine that we're all on dragons and we can go chase them? And Ryan said, oh my gosh, that would be awesome. Okay, let's do it. Everybody imagine their own dragons that they're flying on. And so each of the kids imagined a super cool dragon that they wanted to be on. Nora imagined a pink one, and Will imagined a black one, and Kingston imagined a gold one, and Roman imagined one covered in armor. And they were all thinking in their heads, but it wasn't enough. They thought, oh no, what's happening? Why isn't our imagination working? And Brady said, guys, I think we all might need to imagine something together, because Pierre and his crew are all trying to imagine something together too. So we need to combine ourselves. And they said, yeah, but he has a lot of crew members and there's only 6 of us. And Kingston said, oh, guys, I think we have 3 times the imagination of anyone over there. So he doesn't have more than 18 people over there, does he? And they said, nah, we totally got this. And so they said, all right, who imagined the coolest dragon? And Roman said, I'm pretty sure I was. It's a dragon that's black with red eyes, and it's covered in silver armor. And they said, oh, that sounds really cool. Okay, let's all imagine that we're flying this black dragon covered in armor. And let's have it come up out of the ocean under us, and then we can fly on it. And so all of them started to imagine the same thing. And just then, underneath them, they saw a red glow coming from under them in the ocean. and up out of the water came a giant armored dragon. And each of them landed right on its back as it came up out of the water. And Pierre went, "Oh, oh, oh, what is happening?" Because their cage had also vanished, and now they were riding a giant dragon. And Pierre said, "Men, what is happening? You need to imagine better." And his crew said, "Captain, are we supposed to be imagining a cage?" He said, "Yes, we are supposed to be imagining a cage. Quick, everybody, imagine." And the crew said, but what color is it, Captain?" And he said, "I don't care. Just imagine a cage and don't imagine a dragon." And the crew member said, but Captain, I'm seeing a dragon still. What are we supposed to do?" And Pierre said, "Turn around. Go, quick." And so their ship turned around, and Captain Pierre said, "Quick, unfurl all the sails. Speed." And just then, all the kids got there with the dragon. Kingston bent down and whispered to the dragon something, and the dragon went, and he sucked in a giant breath, and he went, and he didn't blow fire, but he blew a lot of wind into those sails that they had just unfurled on Captain Pierre's pirate ship. And their pirate ship just went and went super fast. And the dragon flew after the pirate ship, and he kept blowing into their sails, and they were going faster and faster and faster. And pretty soon the ship was going over 100 miles an hour, and Pierre was clinging to the ship's wheel, and he was going, "Mommy, Mommy." And just then, they must have reached the boundary of Imagination Island, because the dragon refused to go any further. It turned around and flew them back to their pirate ship. And they looked off in the distance, and they could see Pierre and his crew just like a little speck on the horizon. They said, "I wish we could stay at Imagination Island for longer, but I'm a little worried that Pierre will come back and be able to figure out where it is and build his secret fortress here. So we better be quick. Let's just do a few more minutes, and then we can head home and tell our mom and dad about all this." And so they imagined some amazing things, and they had so much fun. But eventually they had to pack up, and they left, and they sailed home, and they told their moms and dads about their amazing adventure on Imagination Island. The end. If you enjoyed today's episode, leave us a review, and come check out our YouTube channel. Thanks for listening.